This is the Human Operating System Lab, where we learn how humans work so we can build better lives, make better decisions, and help the people around us do the same. This is emotion lesson number 5, naming emotion. In the previous lesson, we explored emotional awareness, the ability to notice when something in your emotional state has changed. You notice tension, a shift in energy, a change in your thoughts. Your attention narrows. Something feels different. That awareness is important, but noticing that something has changed leaves another question. What changed? You may know that you're experiencing an emotion without knowing precisely what you're experiencing. You might say you're upset, stressed, overwhelmed, or simply not feeling right. Those descriptions aren't necessarily wrong, but they don't tell us very much. They are emotional information at low resolution. And if emotion is information, then resolution matters. Part 1. Emotion at low resolution. Think again about the instrument panel from our previous lesson. Imagine driving a car with only one warning light. It doesn't tell you the temperature. It doesn't tell you the oil pressure. It doesn't tell you whether the battery is failing. It simply says, something changed. That is useful information, but it isn't very precise. We often experience emotion in much the same way. I feel bad, I'm stressed, I'm upset, something is wrong. These descriptions tell us that our emotional state has changed, but consider what might exist underneath the word upset. You might be frustrated, disappointed, embarrassed, anxious, resentful, lonely, or afraid. Those experiences may feel similar enough that we group them together, but they aren't identical. And they may be providing very different information. The lower the resolution of the observation, the less information we can extract from it. Part 2. Increasing resolution. The ability to distinguish between emotional states is sometimes called emotional granularity. The term sounds complicated. The principle isn't. It simply means becoming more precise about what you're experiencing. Instead of, I feel bad, you might notice I feel disappointed instead of I'm stressed. You might recognize I'm apprehensive instead of I'm upset. You might discover I'm frustrated. This isn't an exercise in finding impressive words, and it isn't about identifying the perfect label. It's about improving the resolution of your observation. A warning light tells you that something requires attention. A more precise instrument tells you where to look. Emotion works similarly. The better you can distinguish one emotional state from another, the more useful the information becomes. Part 3. Different emotions, different information. Why does greater precision matter? Because different emotions may point toward different kinds of information. Anger may involve a perceived obstruction, violation, injustice, or threat. Fear may involve anticipated danger or uncertainty. Disappointment may involve an expectation that wasn't met. Guilt may involve something you believe you have done. Shame may involve a negative judgment about yourself. But there is an important distinction here. These emotions do not prove those conclusions are correct. Fear does not prove that danger exists. Anger does not prove that an injustice occurred. Guilt does not necessarily prove that you did something wrong. The signal is real. The interpretation still requires investigation. Different emotions invite different questions. Anger might lead you to ask, what feels obstructed or violated? Fear might lead you to ask, what am I anticipating? Disappointment might lead you to ask, what did I expect to happen? The emotion doesn't provide the final answer. It helps identify where to look. Part 4. More than one signal. Emotional states aren't always singular. You can experience more than one emotion at the same time. You might notice anger and disappointment, anxiety and excitement, grief and gratitude. You might initially recognize frustration and later notice embarrassment alongside it. The system does not have to produce one clean emotional reading at a time. Several signals can be present simultaneously, and sometimes they may even seem to contradict one another. You can love someone and be angry with them. You can want something and fear it. You can feel relief after a loss and still experience grief. One emotion does not necessarily invalidate another. And this doesn't mean one emotion is hiding the real emotion underneath it. Human emotional states can be complex. The objective isn't to reduce that complexity until everything fits into one category. The objective is to observe what is actually present. Sometimes the most accurate description may simply be, "I'm angry and disappointed," or "I'm nervous and excited." Greater resolution doesn't always make the picture simpler. Sometimes it allows us to see the complexity more clearly. Part 5. Name the emotion before the story. This may be one of the most important distinctions in emotional observation. Naming an emotion is not the same as explaining it. Consider this statement: "I'm angry." That identifies an emotional state. Now consider this statement: "I'm angry because she doesn't respect me." Something important just happened. We moved from observation to interpretation. Anger is the emotion being experienced. "She doesn't respect me" is a conclusion about what another person thinks or intends. That conclusion may be correct. It may be partly correct. It may also be wrong. The emotion alone cannot tell us. This distinction is easy to miss because emotion and explanation often arrive together. The mind doesn't simply produce anger. It may produce anger and, almost immediately, a story about why the anger exists. Because they arrive together, the story can feel like part of the emotion itself, but they aren't the same thing. And separating them gives us something extremely valuable: a chance to investigate. So one useful discipline is remarkably simple. Name the emotion before the story. First, what am I feeling? Then, what might be contributing to it? Identification first, investigation second. Part 6. A simple naming practice. You don't need an enormous emotional vocabulary to begin doing this. When you notice a change in your emotional state, start broadly. Anger, fear, sadness, joy. Then see whether you can increase the resolution. Perhaps anger is better described as irritation, frustration, resentment. Perhaps fear is concern, apprehension, anxiety or dread. Perhaps sadness is disappointment, loneliness or grief. Sometimes more than one word will fit, and sometimes you won't know. That's useful information too. You might simply say, "Something changed. I think I'm frustrated." Or, "I'm not sure what this is yet." That's enough. The objective isn't perfect labeling. The objective is better observation. Part 7. Observing without becoming. In the previous lesson, we introduced a subtle distinction. There is a difference between being consumed by an emotional state and becoming aware that the state is occurring. There is anger here. There is fear here. There is disappointment here. This isn't an attempt to distance yourself from emotion so completely that you stop experiencing it. Quite the opposite. You're becoming attentive enough to the experience to observe it clearly. You don't have to deny the emotion. You don't have to suppress it. And you don't have to immediately change it. You can simply recognize, this is what I'm experiencing right now. The emotion is present. It matters. It contains information, but it is not the entirety of you. You are experiencing the emotion. You are not reducible to the emotion. Closing, reading the instruments. Emotional awareness teaches us to glance at the instrument panel, to notice when something changes. Emotional naming teaches us to begin reading the instruments. A warning light that simply says, "Something changed," is useful but limited. Temperature, oil pressure, fuel, battery. Each provides greater resolution about the condition of the system. Emotion works similarly. I'm upset tells you something. I'm disappointed tells you more. I'm disappointed because I expected something different, gives you somewhere to investigate. But notice the sequence. First, the signal. Then, identification. Then, investigation. Not the other way around. You do not name an emotion to control it. You name it so you can observe it more clearly, because the more clearly you can identify the signal, the better you can investigate what that signal may be telling you. First, notice the change. Then, learn to read the instrument. This is the Human Operating System Lab.